Welcome to the Inspire Health Podcast. Your life is about to get a whole lot better. Have you ever felt like you tried everything and yet still couldn't find the answers or the solutions that you were seeking? Whether you're dealing with chronic illness, physical or emotional pain, I want you to know that your body is the most sophisticated machine on planet Earth. Your body holds unfathomable wisdom. Trust in it and learn from it. Know that there are answers and there are solutions to your specific health challenges. And we will be uncovering all of them here on the Inspire Health Podcast. I'm so excited to be a part of your healing journey. Your transformation starts now. Hi everybody, welcome back to the Inspire Health Podcast. And first off, before I start, I just want to apologize that I am having to use my regular computer audio or my regular computer microphone because I'm having some microphone difficulties this week and I'm needing to order a new one. So I hope the sound quality is okay. Usually it's not too bad when you go through here anyways, but I'm getting a bit of a squeaky sound with my other one, so I need to get something corrected with it. So anyways, in today's episode, I want to talk about a really important question that I think is essential to ask yourself throughout every single day and multiple times throughout the day. This is something that I've been experimenting with over the last while, and it's something that I have seen as a necessity to many of my patients over the last several months. And it really is such an important thing to ask. Now, whether you are wanting to improve your health, whether you're wanting to prevent disease or create a beautiful relationship, or just live a more fulfilling life, this question is going to apply to you and it's going to be of paramount importance. And I guarantee you that many of you are doing this all day long and not consciously aware of it. And I remember going through too. And then finally, when I actually started to ask myself this question, I realized how often it was playing into my life. And I will go through some examples of that as we go along here. But if we're not consciously aware of it and we're doing it, it can't help but to sabotage just about any goal of creating a healthier, happier, and more meaningful life. Now, before I actually ask you the question that is so important, I need to set the stage as to why this question is just so important. So, if you're watching along here on the YouTube video, I'm doing PowerPoint presentations to try and bring key messages to people. And sometimes it's nice to see it on the PowerPoint because I can break it down a little bit better than just audio. But I like to have different mediums for everybody. So, first part here is let's break down what the top 4 key influences of our life are. Now, if you've been following along with me for a while, you will have heard me talk about intrinsic versus extrinsic factors that affect our lives. Now, we are all inundated by a number of different extrinsic factors that ultimately are just outside of our control. We lose someone that we love, our job comes to an end, a relationship breaks up, the weather is rainy and we don't like it. We're in the midst of a pandemic. A lot of these types of things, they're completely outside of our control and they affect us. But what I'm more curious about and what I think is really more important is that we really dial in the intrinsic factors that are within our control. And these are essentially the 4 primary intrinsic factors that above all else really influence our life absolutely and dramatically. So these areas that I'm going to talk about are really important to become very conscious of and aware of on a regular basis and how much they influence things. And they are within our control to work with. So let's go through each one. So the first one is how we think. What are our thoughts? What storylines are running through our head on a regular basis? Now, a lot of times we run the same storylines over and over and over again, and we're not even aware of them. They become so habitual that they influence our thinking on a regular basis, and they will determine how we think about very different events based on what that storyline is that's running all the time. The next thing is how we feel. What are the actual sensations going on in our body on a regular basis? I talk a lot about feelings because I think it is so important. I believe that this is actually our sixth sense in a lot of ways, in the sense that this is what intuitively connects us to what is going on. This is what really tells us when something feels good or when something feels not so good, when something is pro-life versus when something is anti-life. And we've become so disconnected to our feelings that it is really essential that we start to invest some time in learning more about what our feelings are and paying attention to what they make the body feel like at different times. The next one would be our beliefs. So what are we believing? What are our belief systems around? Because ultimately that's the framework that dictates how we think and ultimately feel about any given situation. Change your beliefs and you will change your life. And the last one is what we are capable of imagining. The power of our brain and our mind to be able to imagine lots of different potential realities is very important. And you see this, kids do this completely naturally. And they're very open and they're able to have like gross imagination. They have such an expansive imagination because they have a very open palate, so to speak, that they can taste the flavors of many different things and experiment with it. And I entice all of us to be able to start to hone in our imagination. Some of the work that I've done with the Silva method and some different courses does a lot around really trying to dial in your imagination. This is in the world of visualization and the power that that can have on us. But it's really important that we start to become comfortable with what we can imagine. I want to break down how this is so important because the thing is that these key influencers will ultimately decide on how expansive and big that you can make your life or how constrictive and small that your life can become. So how you think, how you feel, what you're believing, and what you're capable of imagining will very much determine the size of your life. And why this is so important, because the size of your life will absolutely determine how you feel and view any given and react to any given situation that we're presented with from the external world. So I'm going to walk you through an example that it was explained to me when I was at a retreat with Pema Chodron at one time. Pema Chodron is a Buddhist nun. You've probably heard me talk about her before. She has a great way of bringing certain teachings into a Western way with humor and deep care. And I really value her teachings. And this was explained to me in this way, this concept of our life and how it affects how we view different experiences that we have. So, and if you watch on the video here, you'll see me kind of break this down for you. But picture yourself, and then around you is this box, okay? And this box is essentially the self-imposed limits that we place on ourselves. This is ultimately determined through our past experiences, this is our beliefs, our thought processes, all of these different things, our upbringing. And so the space that is between you and this box represents all of the potential possibilities that exist, okay? And ultimately this is dependent on our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and imaginations. So now imagine what our real limits are. And now draw this huge box around you, much bigger than the little one that you've got around you that's our self-imposed ones. And then the space that's within that box in you is all of that area of underutilized potential. Now what we know from quantum physics now is that there is an infinite number of potential realities that we can experience. So any given situation happens, there's literally an infinite number of possibilities that could take place. But what ultimately determines the probability of landing on a certain possibility is where we tend to focus. So what we focus on tends to expand. Now what we focus on has to do with our beliefs, it has to do with our thoughts, it has to do with how we feel, it has to do with our habitual reactions to things, what we've practiced, what we've learned. So if we want to have different experiences, then we have to change those things to open up the door to landing on different possibilities. Okay, so now you've got you and you've got this small box around you. Now this is how it was explained to me on how the size of your life directly impacts how we view certain experiences. So it was like, pretend that the size of your life is, for argument's sake, the size of, say, a small one-room apartment. Now, You open up the door, and in walks in a Bengal tiger. So your life is the size of this one room or this bachelor apartment, and in walks this big tiger. Now, what is going to be your reaction, your likely response to an event like that? Tiger walks in, you've got this small place, and there's this tiger right there. Chances are it's probably going to be terror. It's going to be super scary. It's going to be traumatic. It's going to be absolute terror and fear-based. And that makes sense. So now that tiger goes out. Now imagine that self-imposed box is gone. And now imagine that your life is actually the size of several football fields wide. And you're sitting up on the bleachers with a pair of binoculars. Now, in walks that Bengal tiger on the exact opposite side of the 3 football fields long, and you can sit up on the bleachers and look at it with your binoculars. Now, exactly the same event, a tiger walks into your bedroom or into your life. But your experience with it could be very different now because you're farther back and you've got more space to be able to experience this new situation. Maybe you actually notice the Bengal tiger's stripes. Maybe you notice the elegance that it moves. Maybe you're looking at the raw beauty of it. Maybe you can appreciate it in a very different way because you've got much more space to be able to handle it. You've got much more space to be able to have a different perspective now to see it with. You've got this lens that changes because you've got this pulled back view of what's going on. You're not sort of right in the middle of it where you can't handle it so much. And so this was the example, was that if our life is feeling very small and contracted, that when new situations pop in, or potentially scary situations, they're going to be felt by a lot of overwhelm, fear response, and worry. But if our life becomes bigger and bigger, it's like we can handle more. And not only do we handle more, but we can see it from a very different perspective. The lens changes. So the same situation, but we have a very different relationship with it because our life can handle more. Okay? This is the importance of why we need to build our life up more and more, make it bigger, and look at the things that are causing our life to contract and get smaller versus the things that allow our life to get bigger and more expansive so that we can have a different relationship with what we experience in the world. So now this comes to the real reality, is that ultimately, according to quantum physics, there really aren't any limits. Sky is the limit. And depending on how much we can work with our thinking and our feeling and our beliefs and our imagination, we can experience more than what we can even contemplate. The potential realities are infinite. So now this ties me to the key question that I think is a really good place to start when we're trying to make our life bigger and more expansive so that we can have a different relationship with what we experience in the world. And so this is a question that I would ask myself regularly throughout the day. And I think everybody right now really needs to pay attention to this because people are dealing with this so much over these last several months. So the question would be this: are the choices that I am making throughout my day coming from a place of fear and worry? Or are the choices I am making throughout my day coming from a place of love and freedom? Now just think about that for a moment. Think about all the different choices that you're having to make throughout your day just to make your day work. You're having to go to work, when you're having to deal with your kids, when you're having to get groceries, when you're having to have conversation with your partner. All the different things that make up your day, all the hundreds and hundreds of different individual choices that you're having to make throughout the day, how many of them are coming from a place of worry or fear about what will or will not happen if you do or do not do certain things, versus how much of your choices are coming from a place of filling you up with a feeling of love and sense of freedom for yourself and others? Now this can be tricky to really break down and know if you are how do you know when you're coming from a place of fear or worry or versus love or freedom? Well, the key thing would be to tie back into feelings. It's going to tell you what is going on. So if it is coming from a place of contraction, if your choices are coming from a place of fear or worry, then it's going to make you feel weak. It's going to make you feel insecure. You're going to feel vulnerable. You're going to feel shameful, powerless, worthless, small, alone, fearful. All of these feelings, these contracted sort of feelings, are going to be playing into things. And we need to start to connect with it. Sometimes people just go through their day feeling this general sense of anxiety, or they feel this general sense of restless energy inside their body that they can't sit still, or they feel resentful all day long, or something, right? You need to tap in and remember to start to pay attention to how you're feeling, and then start to ask yourself throughout the day, how many of your choices are coming from this place? If you are making your choices over and over again from a place of fear and contraction, you are going to have dramatic effects on your health. You're going to have dramatic effects on your ability to heal and get well. You're going to have dramatic effects on the quality of your relationships with others. And ultimately, you are going to limit the capacity for joy and fulfillment in your life. Now, when you are coming from a place of freedom or love for self and others, it feels very different, right? You start to feel joyful. You feel an increase in energy. You have this playfulness. You feel inspired. There's this liberation type of feeling, enthusiastic. All of these types of feelings start to stir up in the body. Now, I'll give you an example of where these things come from, because a lot of times we have patterns where we could have a good experience that could come up, but because of the way that we tend to habitually think about stuff, we very quickly turn it into somewhere that ends up being a fear response. So let's take an example of, I had a patient once who was going to go on a vacation. They totally needed a vacation. It was well-earned, well-deserved. They got their vacation. They were planning it. They had just booked it. And then right away, it became a huge stressor on her. Right away, it started to become about all of the things that were going to go wrong that she needed to prevent. So this would be an example of where then all of the choices she was making were all based from a place of fear. So she was trying to prevent a lot of different things from going wrong. Now, don't get me wrong, this doesn't mean that you don't do your due diligence and make sure that things work, but is that coming from a place of fear of preventing something from going wrong, or could it come from a place of maybe care for yourself, that you're setting things in motion to have a wonderful trip? The bottom line is sometimes the same things get done, but the feeling that is being conjured up inside of you is completely different. And that's what we need to connect to. We need to be able to create things that are more coming from that place that fill us up versus coming from a place of sort of preventing something bad from happening. Another example would be why I maybe choose to not go down a dark, dodgy alley in the middle of the night. Well, one of it could be from a complete place of fear for getting mugged, and another place could be that I just care about myself enough to not put myself in harm's way. End result is that I don't go down the dark alley at night. But the feeling that it comes from is very different. And this is what I'm encouraging you to pay attention to, is can you connect more with the sensation and the feeling behind the choices? If we can start to make more of our choices from a place of care for ourselves, it will dramatically change the course and the direction of your life. Now, if many of your choices are coming from a place of fear, you need to start to question it after a while. So do you find, and I'll give you an example. I was in a relationship years back, and fear of how the person was going to react to anything that I did governed a lot of my decisions. I was concerned whether she was going to be very upset given anything that I might do. So all of my choices were based around, how do I try to prevent her from having a flare-up, for example? So, and what it did is it made me start to feel very restricted, very contracted. My life started to feel less joyful. I felt like I was stressed all the time and overwhelmed around things and worried consciously all the time. And after a point, you need to be able to catch if that's what's happening. Are you worried on a regular basis about how you're going to be perceived? if you do or don't do something? Are you worried about how a loved one or a partner is going to perceive you or question you or think about you, or how they're going to react based on what decision you're going to make, or how your boss is going to react, or how your kids are going to react? Basically, start to look at how much of your decisions are being decided from a place of worry or concern about what's going to happen. And see if you can either find another way to choose from, see if you can find a way to flip it, see the situation a different way. So sometimes people have a lot of discomfort around going to work. So sometimes you might be able to just change the way that you view that process. And sometimes a change in mindset can change the way that you're looking at it. Rather than it feeling like a restriction on your life because you have to go to work, maybe there's a way you can look at it that it creates liberation and freedom because you're gaining some income and you're able to do some different things with it. Bottom line is that there's 3 ways that you can deal with any given situation. You either leave the situation, change the situation, or change the way you react to the situation. Those are your 3 options with every single thing. So if you are finding that you've been trying to change the way that you're viewing something, either in a relationship or in work or in health or whatever it is that you're looking at, and it's not changing, then you might need to leave certain situations, or you might need to try to really change the situation rather than just changing your viewpoint on it. So these are your options around everything. So again, when you're going through your day, self-check, check in, and see how often am I feeling this sense of worry, overwhelm, stress, or fear, and that is what is the guiding light for my choices, or how many of them are coming from a place of love and sense of freedom for myself and others. Now, sometimes we make choices that we think are coming from a place of love for others, but it doesn't actually feel that way. So a lot of times we might do certain things for our kids that we think is coming, or for maybe loved ones that we think is coming from a place of love, but you have to check back in to see how it actually makes you feel. Also, often, a lot of times when people are doing things for other people, it's coming from a place of obligation, which often creates more resentment. So you need to just be honest with yourself around what are you actually experiencing, and how are you really feeling with these different choices that you're making. And then it starts to open the door to then what do you do with it. That's a whole nother story. But the first part is become aware of where you're living. I want to finish this off with a quote from William James. And William James said that of all the creatures on earth, only human beings can change the pattern of their behavior. Man alone is the architect of his destiny. Human beings, by changing the inner attitudes of their minds, can change the outer aspects of their lives. I hope people found this informative, and I look forward to talking to you next week. Well, that was awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to invest in your health and well-being. Since this podcast is brand new, reviews and subscribers are so vital for us to get off the ground and share this really important information. So if you found this information valuable, please post a review and subscribe to the podcast so you'll get our newest episodes. Also, if you know of someone who would benefit from this, please share it with them. You can also find us on Instagram at #InspireHealthPodcast. If you have a question that you'd like to be addressed, direct message me on Instagram or leave a comment on one of my posts. I would love to hear from you. And you can grab our show notes and free resources for each episode at inspirehealthpodcast.com. So be sure to go online and check it out.